Whatever conditions are, that they are not going to stop the race. Like, you should hopefully never get cold.
Obviously, if you're going to go race in negative 10 degrees, you don't want the first time you riding outside to be the day of the race, or you're going to die. Like,
alrighty, first question this week comes in from Tim, based out of Michigan. Tim says, hello, I am currently trying to do the Polar Roll, a fat bike race in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Temperatures will likely be somewhere between negative 10 Fahrenheit and 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I see you guys are all in for heat acclimation. How much, if any, heat acclimation would you recommend when racing in below freezing temperatures?
That's a funny question. I thought he was going to ask, is there such a thing as opposite of heat acclimation?
Cold acclimation?
Is there freeze acclimation? That's what I'd be wondering, is like, can you acclimate your body to freezing temperatures? I don't know.
I mean, if you're following like a heat acclimation protocol, do it for the other benefits other than heat acclimation, and then just pair it with like a cold plunge, just for the sake of like the full body cold exposure. But your time is so much more valuable spent in other places getting ready for this event, like figuring out what kind of nutrition isn't going to freeze in temperatures like that, like what you're going to actually consume, riding your fat bike in like really crap conditions, because they're going to have the Polar Roll. I should connect you with my other athlete who's done this before. They're going to have the Polar Roll no matter what. So like conditions might not be good, like for fat biking. So you just got to be prepared for a really, really long day.
Actually, the UP's got like, I don't know if it's record snow and snowfall. I just saw on the news they've got like more snow than a lot of like high country resorts, like 160 some inches.
Whoa!
Already, yeah. So I don't think it'll be mud. I think they'll definitely have some snow up there. But I've had 2 or 3 athletes that have done this race before. One athlete that's done it a few times, and it definitely is rain or shine or freezing. All hell over. It is like whatever conditions are, that they are not going to stop the race. But it is usually really cold. I think that is typically the theme. I don't remember if he says in here when the race is. I want to say it's in February, like end of February maybe. It's still like very proper winter time.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I don't know that a race in those temperatures really changes the effects of heat acclimation or the benefits of heat acclimation, other than like if you're racing in really hot conditions or at higher altitude. Like those conditions, you definitely will get a little bit more benefit from the standard heat acclimation protocol. But if you're just racing in normal conditions, any benefits that you'd get from heat acclimating, you're going to probably see in these colder conditions too. As long as you're dressing appropriately. Like, I've done plenty of fat biking and fat bike racing, and as long as you are equipped well with good, outerwear, you can stay relatively warm. Like, you should hopefully never get cold. So it's not going to feel to you any different than if you were racing in, standard 60 or 70 degree weather.
Yeah, I was going to say that the heat acclimating, like in the sauna or like those, the really hot trainer rides where you do like 45 minutes of elevated core temp on the trainer. That's the reason you do that stuff is to, like, in layman's terms, is to make your blood more efficient, is the way that I've basically summarized it. And so when you can make your blood more efficient, and that's just going to that's a systemic change where like your entire body is going to work better because of that. Well, despite the temperature outside. But if you're going to acclimate and maybe because the word acclimate is like used differently in those two things, like, because then you also think about acclimate.
I call it heat training. Yeah.
Training. Yeah.
Like he referred to heat acclimation, but I would consider this to be more heat training.
Training, yeah. The sauna.
Any of the modalities that you just mentioned.
Yeah. But like where the primary focus is like blood efficiency.
Yeah.
Or like changing
increased
your
blood, plasma, whatever.
And all that. Yeah. But then there's a whole nother thing of like just riding outside when it's hot or when it's cold. And I think that that's important too, like getting used to the conditions of what you're going to be racing in, which is a different kind of acclimatization, and it's not the same as heat training. Like that's just getting your body, that's just like I guess fancy word for it would be like desensitization, where like the more you do something, the more your body gets used to it. So like you don't want, obviously, if you're going to go race in negative, what do you say, negative 10 degrees, you don't want the first time you riding outside to be the day of the race where you're going to die. Like you're going to freeze to death. Maybe because you just don't know what to wear, like Caitlin was saying, or you don't know what to eat, but like getting out and just like desensitizing your body to those cold temperatures or getting used to it more and more is going to set you up better. And same thing in reverse. Like when I'm training for Unbound, I'm doing the sauna for the benefits of the blood, but I'm also like training in the heat, sometimes like in the heat of the day, because Unbound at the end of the race, you're racing in the heat of the day in the middle of the summer. So you need to be used to what that's going to feel like on race day. So you can make the proper adjustments with hydration, clothing, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then those two things are like
agree.
kind of almost two different buckets. Like, you know what I mean? Like two different training things that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Like you're talking general heat training for the, the kind of broader
physiological benefits.
Yeah. But then you're also talking like specific condition training.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The one thing that I'm actually curious about that may be a negative to heat training or too much heat exposure before this is one of the adaptations that your body will make through heat training is improved sweat efficiency and usually reduced time for sweat onset and then greater sweat volume. So like you're going to produce more sweat. Usually it's more diluted, so it's less sodium concentrated. To keep things balanced.
You're going to sweat sooner and you're going to sweat more.
Yeah, right? Which is not a good thing when it's super cold out. So anyone that has raced or spent time training in really cold weather, the last thing you want is like excessive sweating. Like it's a balance to try and figure out the exact right recipe for your clothing. So you want something, you definitely want a good moisture wicking. I usually recommend like merino wool base layer. So like if you do start sweating, that's at least going to help retain some thermal heat. But you don't want to oversweat because as soon as you like reduce your effort level at all, so let's say you're on a 10-minute long descent or something like that, or you're stuck in a group that's going slower, as soon as you start to reduce that intensity and your core temperature drops a little bit, you will start to get cold, especially your hands, the outer extremities. So that would be the only thing. And I don't know, I don't have like a percentage in mind as like how much increase there is as far as sweat volume goes, at least. But that would just be my one concern with the heat training is that it could work against you in that regard.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that. Because once you get like overly wet from sweat when it's cold, it's like there's not really coming back from that. Like it's not like you're going to dry off.
you have to stay in motion, and you basically have to have really, really good outer layers too at that point. If you don't have windproof layers, anytime anything close to your outer layers start to get cold or wet, it's going to get really cold. So I do personally tend to overdress intentionally when I'm training outside and racing outside. Knowing that like at any point in time you can just start unzipping and cool yourself off, and I'll usually do that before I get to the point of like excessive sweating. I'll start like unzipping things or stripping layers off if I need to, but you have to time it well. And then I always make sure that the either the outermost layer or the second most outer layer is windproof, and that never comes off.
Yeah, better to be a little bit cold than start sweating, because you never know. Like you could have the mechanical and need to get off your bike, and as soon as you do that and you've stopped for a couple minutes, you're
turning into a nice sculpture.
Yeah, so like most people's rule of thumb will be like, you should be cold at the start line of these races, and you should probably be somewhat cold for the first like 5-10 minutes until you really get up to core temperature. If you're warm on the start line, you're probably going to overheat and oversweat. So just a couple things to keep in mind. But I mean, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. But I agree with Drew and Kaylin, though. I think more specific training in this case should be the focus, making sure you're riding your fat bike. Everyone that has ever fat biked knows conditions can drastically change your setup and handling of the bike and what you're going to carry with you and things like that. So I would definitely put more emphasis on that. But if you already have heat training as part of your regimen, like I don't think I would de-train as far as heat goes. Like if you're already doing it, keep doing it. But if you're not doing it, probably don't need to do it for this race.
Yeah, I mean, 20 minutes in the sauna, if it's convenient, like, yeah, do it. Why not? Like,
but to go drive to the gym to go in the sauna for 20 minutes and go out of your way to do it,
I don't know if it's worth the investment.
I don't think that's worth it. But if you've got one at your house,
especially if it's detracting from the main focus of what you guys are talking about.
Exactly, especially since it's February. So at this point, almost everyone is lacking proper aerobic base conditioning. At this point, you're like, no one's gone through a full base block yet, base period yet. No one's really started to do like a full proper build at this point. So most people are they could just use some more training. So like if you've got 2 hours a week that you're putting towards training instead of heat training, I think that's much more beneficial, especially when talking about some of those adaptive benefits of like increased, blood plasma volume, increased VO2 max, increased lactate threshold, increased time to exhaustion. Like you're probably going to exceed those benefits just from an extra 2 hours of training per week than 2 hours of heat training.
Yeah.
Those are kind of cherry on the top things. Cool. Anything else?
That's why you should just build a sauna in your basement. So you don't have to.
Like I said, if you've got it handy, then that's great. Okay, let's move on to Michael's question here. Michael from Connecticut. He says, "Hey, Matchbox crew, I'm new to cycling this year, being my first full year and have an FTP of 225. However, on long rides over 3 hours, I average 140 watts with normalized power on 160. With the New England winter starting, I plan to use November through April and really focus on increasing my FTP, but also my long ride average watts. My goal is to do a century next year and a couple Grand Fondos. Here are a few questions. What is the best way to increase my long ride average over the 6-month period? Should I structure November through January? So I know we're a little bit late to this one as far as this part goes, but as base training, February and March as build phase, and then April as peaking for summer rides and Grand Fondos. And then third question, through the winter, I can dedicate 90 minutes, three nights of the week, another weeknight as leg and core strength training, and then I can do Saturday and Sunday 2 or 3 hours per day, all on the indoor trainer. How should I structure my weeks?"
I feel like I'm a little confused by the question, because if his FTP is 225 and he's averaging 140 normalized 160, like that is actually in your endurance zone. So if you're doing a 3-hour endurance ride, what's the stress?
It sounds like he's so new to cycling, he maybe doesn't know that.
Yeah, so for all the listeners out there, 140 watts, just quick math, 140 watts would put him at 62% of FTP, and 160 watts, which would be as normalized, is going to put him at 71% of FTP, which 71% of FTP for 3+ hours is actually pretty good. Like for a new cyclist, I mean,
that's
I'm actually giving you a lot of kudos. Most people cannot do that for that long.
I would tell him, if it's just an endurance ride, I would even tell him to back it off a little bit, because he's kind of on the tempo at that point.
Yeah, which is a temptation a lot of times, especially with newer, whether it's newer to the sport or newer to training cyclists, they tend to want to override their longer rides because that's how it makes them feel like they're pushing themselves, when we all know, the idea is to just like keep things very aerobic and try and build your base on those days.
Sounds like Michael.
I think basically what he wants is like he just wants to improve his FTP. At the end of the day, if he's doing the right things, he's in the right zone, normalized power is right where it should be, or higher. So if you want to increase your watts over 3 hours, your FTP has to improve. If your FTP doesn't increase, you're not going to really increase your average watts over those rides all that much.
And like the fitter you get, your FTP is going to go up. But obviously, there's structure that you can add to your training plan, which he even asks, like, how should I structure my training plan that will make your FTP increase faster? Like if you just ride a lot of endurance at the wattage that he's talking about, like 140 to 160, I mean, eventually his FTP will get up because he's just going to get fitter and fitter. But he could do some specific training for sure. Yeah, so let's talk about that, because that's what he asked. What is, it sounds like his goal is either these longer group rides, or he says, he talks about a couple Grand Fondos that he'd like to do. We're talking longer rides.
what would you have him focus on if his goal is to like increase his power output for some of these longer rides, and really just focused on FTP increase?
Periodization. It sounds like this guy is like so new to cycling that maybe he doesn't understand he doesn't know about the fundamentals of like a good training plan. And so I think him understanding what periodization is and what that entails is probably like the first step. And
yeah,
periodization is just all about
he's onto something, right? Because he talks about, he wants to structure his training as base and then build and then peak.
Right.
So like
so he labels all the categories. Yeah, you're right.
What would you have him, if you were coaching him, what kind of just general would you have him doing like throughout the base season, let's call it?
Probably pretty standard base season.
Tempo, threshold?
Yeah, tempo, some threshold towards the end of it. And then as he moves into that build phase, start to ramp up some intensity. But because his events are longer, like if he wants to do these grand fondos, I would just keep the volume high through that build phase instead of dialing back the volume. Like a lot of times in a I guess traditional periodization plan, you would, once you get into that build phase, you'd increase the intensity and drop back the volume. But nowadays, like so many people are training for these long events, like 100-mile gravel races, 100-mile grand fondos, that I think nowadays the new traditional periodization is almost just like build up the volume throughout the base phase and then just maintain that high volume into the build phase, which is harder to do. That makes recovery that much more important.
Yeah, I agree.
He says he has up to 3 hours on weekends, both Saturday and Sunday, up to 3 hours, and then 90 minutes, 3 weeknights. So I don't know if increasing volume is possible for him. And if not, I would probably do a bit more tempo in his base phase.
As far as like a week-to-week thing, I would do with the way that he was, there's probably two different options. You could do like 1 day of intensity during the week and then make one of your days on the weekend intensity, but also make it longer, almost like a durability workout, like a 3-hour ride with intervals. Or maybe you build up to that. So you start with 2 intensity days during the week, maybe like a Tuesday, Thursday. Those are your 2 intensity days. And then Wednesdays, maybe like an easier day or endurance. And then on the weekends, you just focus on the volume, like just getting in 2-3-hour rides on both Saturday and Sunday. And then once you get really comfortable with those 3-hour rides and those 2 intensity sessions during the week, you just shift one of those intensity days to Saturday, but make it like a long intensity day, like durability.
Right.
That's what I think. That's the way I would do it.
Yeah, I've been going back and forth with that. My reasoning is actually not because I think that those, call them durability workouts or, mixing intensity and longer rides are really that one. I do think they're important, but they're also like pretty hard to execute. So not everyone can handle them.
Right.
But the thing that I've seen a lot with athletes over the years is when you give them Tuesday, Thursday structure, and then you say, okay, Saturday, go make it your long ride. Almost always the long ride also turns into an intensity ride. Like it is so hard for athletes to like really be disciplined to the point where that is a true aerobic endurance ride. And then you end up with 3 hard days in the week, and they're spending like, sometimes it's like 20-30% over threshold of an endurance ride, and it's like it is hard, and I empathize with them. Like it's not as fun sometimes to just go out and do like a true endurance ride. It's not easy if you've got a really hilly terrain, or if you're riding in a group. Like it can be challenging to have the discipline to make a longer ride truly aerobic. I have been leaning a little bit more into pushing that second intensity day into the weekend just to like compensate for that. Give them a 90-minute or 60 to 90-minute trainer endurance ride during the week where it's like a lot easier for them to just say like, all right, I'm going to go ride easy for an hour and a half or whatever, and then let them kind of tear it up on the weekend, because that is more fun. It is, while it takes discipline to hit the numbers, there's not as much discipline within like the confines of a true endurance ride. So I've kind of been going back and forth with that, but I also agree with you, Drew, that it's especially for this guy who is newer to cycling, like those are hard workouts to do a true structured ride and mix it with 2, 3, 4 hours of total ride time. Like that is hard to do, and that can be really taxing week in, week out. So I do think it would be important for him to build up to that point. And it could start with maybe you just make that Saturday ride, the intensity doesn't need to be quite as hard. So let's say you're doing 3x15 tempo on a Tuesday night. Maybe on the weekend, you just do like 3x10 tempo plus endurance. So you're not getting as much stimulus from the intervals, but you're combining the stimulus with that longer ride. So you make it easier, more manageable to execute, but still getting kind of the benefit of combining those two. I don't know. What are you guys' thoughts? I mean, have you guys seen, do you guys see that regularly too, where athletes tend to struggle with that true like long endurance ride?
Yeah, especially if they go to a group ride. I mean,
yeah.
All bets off if you go to a group ride. I mean,
yeah,
it's like that's not gonna happen.
Right.
So, I mean, I think everybody's different. Like some people are really motivated to do the group ride every weekend, but like I'm not motivated at all to do group rides. Like I'm fine to just train by myself all the time, but
right.
I guess most people are not that. Most people are motivated to do the group rides.
Yeah, which is fine too. We have to keep in mind as coaches, that's part of it. We're not trying to make everyone into robots.
Yeah, right.
Group rides are fun. Group rides can be motivating. Group rides are often something that everyone looks forward to each week. So it's like we don't want to take the fun out of cycling. We just want to make the cycling more fun because your ability is enhanced. I mean, that's
like
really
we
all
want to
we're
make
trying to
sure
do.
we're like balancing the. We're not saying don't do the group ride, but let's make sure the training plan is balanced so that you can do the group ride, but also not overtrain at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I agree.
Endurance ride, like it's never going to be what it actually should be. And then they realize like, oh, there's so much descending. So like every time I'm going uphill, I'm just going to go a little bit harder to hopefully get my normalized power to be what it should be for an endurance ride. And then it's yeah. But I don't want to take away your long weekend mountain bike ride. That sounds great. That's what I want to do. So
right. Yeah. So that's exactly what I'm saying is like, to have that balance. Sometimes even though I don't think it's necessarily the only way to do it or the best way to do it, it's like, that's the best way for that individual, because otherwise, you get into 3+ intensity sessions a week, and that's just going to, be a recipe for disaster. Let's see. Last thing I want to touch on with this question. So, he asked about, structuring his season, basically. Should I do base training November through January, February and March as build phase, and then April as peaking for summer rides and Grand Fondos? What are your thoughts on that?
Make the base season longer. I would like extend the base into February and push off doing the build until March, April. And then think of the summer, like peaking is when you should be doing the events. It seems like he's kind of peaking before his events, but that peak phase is for when you're doing your events. And so if you've got summer fondos and races you're looking at, it's during those months. Like let's say June the 30th is the big fondo you want to do. Well, June should be your peak phase, not May.
Right. Yeah.
So you would want to build, and like the main reason for that is because when you're in the peak phase, you're probably losing fitness because you're going to actually like decrease your training so that you can show up to these races with more form, like ready to perform. So usually when you do that, especially for like weeks on end, if you have 3 or 4 race weekends and you're just kind of racing and recovering, like, and you're not really doing much training in between those, which is probably the way you should do it. If you've already done all the training up to that point, then yeah, you should just be racing and recovering through your peak phase. But the main reason you don't want that to happen too early is because you're losing fitness when you do that. So you want to do your build phase for as long as you can.
Yep.
Because you're actually going to be building fitness, hence the word build. And so like push that for as long as you can, and then do your peak phase right when those events start happening, so that so you don't lose fitness throughout that final block.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I had the same thought as far as it seemed like he was peaking a little prematurely. So, yeah, I echo what you said.
Sweet. I think this guy should hire a coach. He seems like the prime candidate for a coach. Like he's asking all the right questions. It seems like he knows that he needs like some assistance or some structure, but he doesn't know exactly how to do it. And he's so new to cycling, but he's like pretty strong. And he seems like a great candidate for a coach.
Yeah, I agree.
So
definitely
mention his podcast, save $100, Matchbox 100. promo code. Save $100 on your first month.
You guys want to do one more?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, let's do this. Last question is from Quinn in Minnesota. I've been wondering about focusing on threshold power versus repeatability at over threshold power. I know the answer is why not both? And it would never hurt to have a higher FTP. But, and then here's his two things. Basically, my area is full of steep 1 to 2 minute climbs, almost nothing over 3 minutes. With my watt per kilo, I have a hard time hanging with the faster riders on the climbs, but I can do much better on the flats and gentle rolling terrain due to absolute watts and being arrow-ish for a recreational gravel rider. A local spring gravel race starts with a section on repeated climbs followed by pancake flat, then rolling terrain. I think if I made it to the flat, I could hang with the front or second group, but I'd need to go way over threshold to keep up on the climbs to get there. I don't think it would be realistic to raise my FTP enough to stay in threshold on the climbs, and it's probably already high enough to hang on the flats and rolling sections. In the months leading up to the race, should I focus on over threshold repeatability? If so, how would you go about this? And then he gives context, 88 to 90, we'll just call it 88, man. Just keep it at 88 kilos. 88 kilos, 340 watts. I'm helping you out, Quinn. 1 minute power is just under 700 watts. 3 minute is around 450, and 5 minute is a bit over 400 watts. Dude, that's pretty good. Those are, especially those shorter efforts
Solid
there.
numbers.
I mean, 450 for 3 minutes, man. That's pretty stout. I get that, Quinn is on the larger side as far as weight goes, at least as far as first cyclists go. I'm not saying for the average human. 88 kilos, let's see, 194 pounds.
I'm curious, he doesn't tell us his height, I don't think. And he doesn't, I'm very curious.
Quinn's from Minnesota. Assume he is just a large human. He's probably tall. He's probably really strong.
I mean, I want to know his body fat percent. I think this is this would be one of those conversations where body fat percent would be, a worthwhile conversation, because if you have, and he acknowledges the fact that he weighs 88 kilos and that he's struggling to get over the climbs, but he's really strong. He's got a 340 FTP. So if he's got weight to lose to help him get over those climbs, because he's at 20% body fat and he could get down to 15%, and that can help him get over those climbs and he can maintain the FTP while he does it, I would consider that. You can adapt your training, but you can also adapt your body. You can change the way your body, especially something like body fat percent, if it's there. If that's what I'm saying. It would be nice to know that. If he's already at a low body fat percent, then I'd say don't try to do that. But I think a lot of people have extra body fat percent that they could slim down.
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't
Quinn. Don't take this the wrong way.
I'm trying to say it in a I'm not saying. I'm just saying performance. I'm trying to keep it performance focused.
So, I was gonna say something else. So, I was able to actually find a picture of Quinn.
Oh boy!
In today's world,
yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's easy to do. So, as I said, don't take this the wrong way. You gave us your
point.
email. So, and we're just trying to help you out. Quinn is the quintessential Minnesotan big, strong dude. He's he's tall, he looks lean, he looks strong. So
Okay.
let's assume there's not a whole lot of fluff to extract.
Fair enough. Well, if there is fluff, that's one route.
I agree.
We'll go down the other route for the sake of this conversation.
And he mentioned that there's a bunch of 1 to 2 minute climbs. So what kind of climbing is he talking about in this event? Because if it's punchy climbs, then
so that's
what I was going to say. Pounds is gonna.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing I was going to say. I mean, watt per kilo tends to be a larger factor the longer the climb is.
True. Yeah,
longer and steeper, in some regard. But if we're talking 1 to 2 minute climbs, generally it's it's not a factor, but it's less of a factor than a 20-minute climb. You're gonna have a better chance of hanging just based on sheer wattage than watt per kilo on those shorter climbs. But also, guarantee you, Quinn, I mean, I've done races like this being from the Midwest. I guarantee. So when I was racing at peak, I was 66 kilos and 360 FTP. I was never riding threshold on a 1 to 2 minute climb. I was always riding over threshold. And I was one of the racers that was probably had the highest watts per kilo in the race, but I was always over threshold for those shorter climbs. So I don't think there's anything you can do to increase your FTP to stay in threshold is what I'm trying to say on these shorter climbs.
That is
Everyone
a good point.
is going over threshold for those shorter climbs.
Yeah. It's just a matter of like if you can do that over and over again and not get dropped.
Exactly. So I think that repeatability is going to be critical for you here. He talks about doing threshold over threshold. So that's, I'd consider those to be like super threshold efforts. And I'm a big fan of those. I have my athletes do those a lot. But generally it's as a way to either maintain FTP or increase FTP and start to work on some of that repeatability. If you're doing 5x8, 6x8 super threshold, it's a way to kind of improve your ability to recover after, sending your lactate through the roof basically for 8 minutes. But I think in this case here, we're talking, you said in the description here, it's, 1 to 2 minute climbs, nothing over 3 minutes. I think if anything, you need to be focusing on more of that repeatability quite a bit above threshold. Now, I don't think you need to go and say, do an entire, I do think for a race like this, having a VO2 max block leading up to it would be really important. But I think you could also do something where it's kind of in between, where you're doing, 2 to 3 minutes and maybe not full VO2 max, full gas efforts, but it could be like a controlled above threshold effort. So call it 10% of FTP, where you can do 10 or 12 by 2 minutes of that pretty handedly with like minimal recovery. And that's going to be the important part. It's like it's improving the repeatability, but repeatability is not just like how much time or how many the quantity of intervals you can fit into a session. It's also like reducing the amount of recovery time that you have between those individual efforts. And that's often what kills people in these races. It's not so much that they couldn't go back out and do another one. It's that they can't do another one after only a 40-second descent. That's a lot of time with these rolling terrain races. It's like, you're punching way over threshold for 2 minutes and then you only have a minute to recover.
Or like kind of along those same lines, they're not used to doing in a race. You usually do, you go really hard on the climbs, but you're not coasting to the next climb.
Correct.
Like, so incorporating a little bit of intensity between the intervals to where you get used to recovering at a higher power. That's the way I describe it, of like, we're going to do VO2 or these bursts of VO2, but we're going to also do tempo between them so that your body gets used to like recovering at tempo. Because in a race, it's like you have to do the climb, but then rarely does everybody just sit up after the climb and easy soft pedal to the next climb. So, I think there are workouts where that's good. Like if you're intentionally just totally focused on improving your climbing ability or VO2. But then there are other times where you can pedal at a higher power between the intervals. And the way that I structure those are in the base phase. I'll do like tempo workouts with 1 or 2 minute blocks of VO2 sprinkled throughout the tempo. So like maybe it's a 20-minute tempo with a 1 minute VO2 every 4 minutes. So it's kind of replicating like, oh, we're going to hit a short little climb during a race. And so for 1 minute, I got to go VO2, but then I'm going to go straight back to tempo right after.
Yeah. That's where like, over-unders becomes a pretty, routine staple in most high performance plans. My last coach turned me on to lactate clearance workouts where you're doing 2 or 3 minutes at VO2 max power and then straight into, 5 to 10 minutes at, high percentage of endurance or even like tempo, so kind of what you're talking about, Drew, depending on what the demands of the race are going to be and what your level is.
FTP range.
70 to 80% FTP. Yep.
Low tempo. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, and what that also does is it teaches you to like find that limit in those 2 to 3 minutes of VO2 max without exceeding your limits. Because it's really easy and it's good. Like, when you go out and do like a true VO2 max workout, like each effort should be pretty much exhaustive. Like you're pushing yourself as hard as you can for 4 minutes.
You get to the end of it and you
get to the end and you're like,
I'm not going to pedal anymore.
No, like you need to pull off on the side of the road and catch your breath. And that is the purpose of it. They're VO2 max. They're intended to to reach a state of like absolute like oxygen uptake.
Yeah.
But
I think that
for these though, like especially for a race, like you can't do that in a race. You can't do an all-out exhaustive 4-minute effort
Unless the finish
unless
is
it's
at
the
top.
end. Yeah, unless it's the end of the
yeah.
race. You
Yeah.
have to be able to recover and do something on the backside. So
Yeah.
that's where it teaches you to find that limit, but not exceed that limit.
I think there's a good point to make here in the same vein of like the lactate clearance, the VO2, all of these workouts that we're suggesting for repeatability, they are hard. And like in general, your race should not be the hardest thing you do. The hardest thing you do should be in training.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people forget that.
For sure.
I do like the way he lays out. He says, and this is all kind of in regard to one of the, what do I call it? The principles of training or principles of periodization, which is specialization, where you look at your goal event and say, what does my goal event require? Because you could just train for general fitness. Like, I just want to get better. And there, you could come up with a pretty good training plan with that goal. But this guy has a particular goal in mind with a particular course that is for that goal. And he lays it out. He says there's climbs at the beginning, it's flat, and then there's some rolling terrain. So he knows exactly what he needs to do. And I always kind of found myself split on how to prepare for an event like this. So you can prepare for it in regards to, okay, I have to stay with the front group on those climbs. Or if I get dropped, like you could just say, well, the goal is to stay with the front group. So like I need to do what I need to orient my training to focus on that first part. Because if I don't make it to finish first you got to finish. So like you gotta stay with that front group on the first part of the course. Like you can't optimize for the flats knowing you're going to get dropped on the climbs if your goal is to stay in the front group. So like, but then, you could make the argument of like, oh, well, I want to go the fastest over the course of the entire race, which would be a completely different strategy. So there's two different strategies. Like, do you do what's best to stay with the front group, or do you do what's best to get the fastest time? Sometimes those two things are separate. Like entire choice is a big reason for this too. Cause like, in particular, BW Arizona starts on like a really big climb, paved climb, but then most of the race is on mountain bike trails. So like, do you pick a tire that's better for the paved climb so that you don't get dropped right off the bat? Or do you pick a tire that's like good for the single track after you get dropped? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, it's like, I don't know. Like that's the fun part of strategy and tire choice or even just preparation in regard to training is like, what are the things that my goals require and which things do I focus on? And he's doing that, which is cool.
Yeah, you just have to also make sure that you are marrying your preparation with your race day plan. So, if let's just say on the flip side, Quinn here was like, you know what? I don't think there's anything I can do to alter my fitness to the point where I can actually hang with the front group on the climb. So I am going to do the best thing that I can do to increase my output for the 2 hours of the flats in between all the climbing so that I can either catch up back up to the front group or break away from that front group. Well, if you optimize your fitness to do that, to like have the highest performance possible on the flats, you can't also go and blow yourself up on those early climbs trying to stay with the front group. You know what I'm saying? Like you may have to make sure that your preparation is married to your plan going into it. In that kind of scenario.
Also, there's a guy who he's a professional racer, gravel racer, and he sucks at riding his bike off road. I won't name him, but yeah, I want to, but I won't. But he knows that about himself. So instead of like, I don't get it, but instead of trying to get better at off-road racing, or maybe he has and he's just not gifted in that ability. Like maybe he just can't get better at riding off-road. So instead of getting better at off-road, he always tries to get a gap before we get to the off-road sections. And so like every race I've done with this guy, if there's an off-road sector coming up in 3 miles, he's off the front. Like he's trying to get as big of a gap as he can because he knows he's going to lose the gap in the off-road sector. So like maybe you do that for these climbs. Like maybe you send a flyer at mile 0 and maybe somebody comes with you. That'd be better. And then you can get a gap on these climbs, and then you're basically just waterfalling the climbs.
It's like an excessive sag climb.
Yeah, you get a gap. And then if they catch you on the last, ideally they would catch you on the last climb, and then you're with the front group on the flats where you're stronger. That's right. Like prime time. mean, that's a strategy too.
That's not a bad call. Also, yeah, if you don't know the concept of waterfall or sag climbing, the concept is get to the front of the pack before the climb starts.
Oh yeah.
And slowly trickle your way back through the group so that by the top of the climb, you are at the back of the group. Not dangling off the back, so you don't want to have to, overexert yourself to get back on, but you want to be like one of the last rider or two.
When you're at Pro Nats, I used this strategy so good that some of my friends texted me after the race and were like, dude, I saw you attack at the base of the climb. And I was like, joke's on you. I was not attacking. I was just undropping myself. Like I was preparing to get dropped. Like I knew that if I wasn't at the front, I wasn't going to I wasn't going to make it to the top of the climb in the group. And there were like I made it like 3 laps further. I did end up getting dropped, but I made it like 3 laps further with the front group because every lap I'd be the first one at the base of the climb, leading the group. And I'd be the last guy barely hanging on to the back of the group over the top of the climb. It was awesome. So it was like perfect, but eventually it did work for a long time.
Yeah. So Quinn, I mean, I would still, if I were you, I would say focus on some of those 2 to 4 minute efforts in the lead up to this race. I would work on trying to, slowly progress over the course of a, say, 8 to 12 week build. Start with something that seems fairly manageable, 5 by 3 minutes at 110% of FTP. And try and increase the number of sets you can do within a session, while also focusing on either maintaining that recovery time or decreasing that recovery time. And then I would also mix in some of these either lactate clearance or over under style workouts as the second workout in the sessions or in the week, so that you're able to recover at a higher effort level.
So I think durability workouts are great, like doing a set of over-unders and then 1,000 kJs and then another set of over-unders, but that's a really advanced workout and you need to build up into that. So I would say do all of your intervals at the front of it first, and then just try and do 1,000 kJs of endurance in the back half. Like that in itself is sometimes pretty challenging.
When I was my first coach, whenever I did any workout, it always finished with a 20-minute tempo. Every single workout I did was here are your intervals and then do 20 minutes of tempo. And I always finished. And I think that was always just a good, if you've got the time to do that, I feel like that's just a really good practice to do, especially for his event where he's doing VO2, but then it goes into a flat section. That kind of is replicating his race effort. Do your intervals and then recover a bit and then just tack on a 20-minute tempo. Or if you've got the time, like Caitlin said, just tack on extra endurance.
So you're saying even if you did a VO2 max session, at the end of that, you would do 20 minutes tempo? Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that
maybe I just wasn't going hard enough on my VO2, but
that's
the,
and maybe I knew maybe I have a 20-minute tempo after this, so you leave one in reserve or something. Well,
I'm assuming you're not going straight into that tempo. You'd probably have some.
It'd be 10 or 15 minutes, a full recovery, and then you the tempo.
Yeah, which that's. I mean, honestly, I don't dislike that, even just for the litmus test of not overriding your intervals sometimes.
Right.
While we talk about VO2 max efforts should be exhaustive, it should not deplete your reserves to the point where you cannot do another one. We've talked about this before. There's a difference between going max effort for one set and then going max effort for the entire session. So, if you know that you've got 20 minutes of tempo to finish your ride, you're probably going to leave 1 or 2 in reserve, which is appropriate.
And I like it for just maintaining tempo, because we'll do so much tempo in base, and then what happens a lot is you get in a build and you never even touch tempo again. You're just doing high intensity. So I think sprinkle in a 20-minute tempo here and there, and that helps just kind of keep that bucket kind of filled up instead of just totally neglecting it.
Cool. Yep. Anything else for Quinn?
Yeah, and if he's got extra fluff, don't forget about that.
All right, cool. Good luck with it, Quinn. Let us know how it goes. All right. Good stuff, guys.
Cool.
We'll catch you next week.
See ya.
See ya.